On this week's episode, we discuss biohacking, food doping for performance. Could swapping gut bacteria from elite athletes be the next big edge or just madness? Starbucks protein foam. Is protein cold foam at your local cafe the start of a new trend or just hype? Super shoes and recovery clogs. Are we stepping into a future where shoes act like performance drugs? Plus, why do American foods still have artificial dyes Europe banned long ago? This and more on this week's episode. Welcome to this week's episode of L.I.F.T.S. I'm back from what it seems like 3 weeks on the road. Nice to be back at home again, recovering from jet lag. And I'm here with my co-host, Mo. How are you doing today, Mo?
I'm doing good. We are just on the back of July 4th weekend. Were you even in the US for July 4th? I'm not sure. I know you were traveling.
I was. I got back and I was enjoying the fireworks that you guys do here and watching how they were blowing up everything.
That is a very American thing. We did a little staycation. We went up to Baltimore, which is about an hour north of where I am in DC. Stayed by the harbor, watched the fireworks with the kids, and had a really good time. So it was a nice little staycation, and glad to be back. We've kicked off the last couple of episodes, Matthew, talking about some new wellness hacks or products or things we've tried. So I want to kick this off with one that I've actually ordered and tried. I think you know that I've talked about being on this Tonal 12-week program. I've got one more workout left. I'm feeling yoked and really, really good. I've gained 10 pounds, Brian, and we'll get to you here in a minute. And I really wish I had this body pod scale. So I paid for this. Um, it's called Hume Health. With the Father's Day discount, ended up being about just over $200. But I've been really impressed by what it could do from a body comp analysis standpoint, not just your weight, but skeletal mass, water retention, just breaking down your lean muscle mass, and so on. It's been a fantastic product, and I'm telling everyone about it. Again, we're not sponsored by them, or I did not get the scale for free, but just a product that I literally ordered. And I wish I had this from the beginning of this 12-week program that I did, because I think I could have really tracked to find out, well, how much of my 10 pounds that I gained is muscle. I'm guessing it's about 6 pounds versus how much is fat. Um, but more importantly, more on Sunday, I went out for a run in DC. It gets really hot and humid, and I noticed that from my scale, it showed that I was not fully hydrated. So I hydrated well before the run, and that was just really fascinating kind of feedback. And again, for a $200 scale, that gave me a lot of the same feedback as a Sika scale or an eVolt scale. I found that pretty impressive.
What do you know about the technology? Like, is that? I mean, I've heard good and bad things about some of these scales and the accuracy and how much you pay for them and everything. Like, with being a sort of a technologist, are they using good technology or sensors to be able to give you a good? I assume they are, otherwise you won't be using it. But what do you know
No,
about that?
I definitely did my homework before getting it. Look, so the interesting thing is 2 days before I did my first Hume Health scale and measurement, I actually went to try out eGym's new Sika scale. It's a 20 grand Sika integrated scale into the eGym Wellness Pod. So I had all of my metrics there. I also did my wellness check because I turned 45 at the doctor, and I had all of their metrics from their scale. So I had two points of comparison, and see this $200 scale was spot on, like literally spot on, which is why I was just blown away by it. So from a technology perspective, they're definitely using an ECG technology for sure, because they're having you hold the handle up, as you're doing the measurement, and they're using bioimpedance to get hydration, bone density, body fat percentages, and things like that. So it's technology that's been out there, but not at this price point. So I've been incredibly impressed by it. So that's been my new wellness tip for the week. Matthew, how about you?
Well, I've been traveling a lot, quite a few different time zones. I've been to East Coast, West Coast, London, Europe and all over. So I thought, well, I want to really figure out my sleep. And I've tried over the years a bunch of these sleep aids, but I always feel a little bit groggy, or it tends to do more damage when I get back. So I thought, well, I'll avoid doing anything. And I was reading up about doing this, doing these sort of 20 hours off, 4 hours on intermittent fasting protocol, specifically around my travel, the whole period, like from when I left to when I was there, and it seemed to really help with when I felt great when I went on the flight itself. Normally, if you do a long international flight and you don't feel very well, like you kind of get to the other side, feel a little bit groggy, feel a bit tired. But I got the other side, had a small coffee, had hydrated myself, and felt pretty good the whole day. Didn't drink and managed to sleep pretty well throughout the night. And I kept that up for about 14 days, and I've got back as well just this past weekend, and I've not had any issues whatsoever. I woke up a little bit in the night, as you typically do, but I'm not sure. As I was reading it, apparently they reckon it can sort of there is some research in terms of how it helps to realign your circadian systems because of the eating, apparently. I don't know what that means and how that affects things, but certainly I'd recommend, if you are doing a long flight, then give that a go. It's essentially 20 hours fasting, 4 hours eating, and then within the eating window I kind of kept pretty high protein, relatively low carbs, and had sort of fruits and that sort of stuff. So it's a pretty, the 4 hours was with good food, but it's definitely one of the best sort of experience I've had with an international flight so far.
And so did you keep that 20-hour fasting and 4-hour eating throughout the entire trip, or just for the
Yeah,
flight?
for the whole trip. Yeah,
For the
yeah.
whole
So
trip.
prior to going, and then for the whole period. So I think that's the key. I think you've got to sort of keep it up. Now, the only thing which I did when I got to the UK, which I wouldn't recommend, is that when I did my 4 hour, because of how my meetings were scheduled, I was eating sort of later in the day. So I finished my meal at 9 o'clock, which I wouldn't recommend. But it was just, if I could do it, I would probably finish at around about 6 or 7. But it just wasn't possible with everything that I got lined up to get the good food. But outside of that, it was worked a dream.
No, great to hear that. That was my next question: is when did you have your 4-hour window of eating, and how did you time that with training, or did you train?
I just trained in the evening, so I worked out, like almost did a sort of fasted workout, and then I ate afterwards. Though that bit probably needs a little bit of working out, but as you know, when you're traveling and you've got business meetings and everything, it's difficult to cram all of your ideal sort of workouts and food timings in there. But yeah, yeah,
No,
definitely
great.
worked
Well,
out.
look, I'm excited to have our special guest on today. So this is someone who has helped scale some of the most recognizable names in our space, including Tough Mudder, Barry's Bootcamp, and Othership. But I think what really sets him apart, and I've gotten to know Brian over the last few months, is really how he's bringing founders and operators together in a very new way. And Matthew, you and I have had an opportunity to connect in one of his sessions. Brian is the founder of Wellness Growth Mastermind, which is a thriving community of more than 200 wellness leaders who come together not just to network, but and we've seen this, to really actively help each other grow. It's part collective brain trust, I think, part support system, and how I look at it, and it's become a go-to resource for some of the most ambitious brands in the space. Prior to that, he's a founder. He founded Anchor, which is a mindful social workout that blended connection, presence, and movement. Brian, welcome to Lifts. You've had a front row seat at how this industry has been evolving in so many ways, just based off your mastermind group, and in many ways, you also helped shape some of it. I wanted to start with a question for you. What is the biggest shift you're seeing right now in the wellness world, and what do you think is still being overlooked?
Well, thanks for having me, guys. It's love your little tips. I mean, I feel like I'm somebody who I can fall victim to. If I hear of anything new, I'm just like, oh, I can't wait to try 20 hours on and 4 hours, and excited to get the new scale too. And but no, I mean, yeah, I'm somebody who lucky enough to have been in the industry for a while now. Really early at Tough Mudder, really early at Othership. Spent time helping berries grow. Been a founder myself, so I kind of have worn a number of different hats. And I think that now, as I run this community of like 200 founders, and just to be clear, it's not just in the fitness space. These are people who are wearable. We've got people from Aura, 8 Sleep, Peloton, Headspace. Like we are some brick and mortar, but also some food. Food is medicine. So I think what I'm just really witnessing, and I guess we've been seeing it for a while, is ultimately the consumer at this point expects health and wellness and everything to be fully integrated. They expect their gym to be well versed in all the different areas, be it nutrition, be it mental health, be it recovery. And then at the same time, I just think that there's such partnership potential and opportunity to collaborate between these spaces. And so what I think is a bit overlooked is I think I still see the spaces a bit siloed, and I see myself as like a bridge, as like, okay, hey, let's make sure we're not just talking to the gym manufacturers or just talking to people who are in the fitness space, but also people who are building Aura or people who are building Headspace, because ultimately there's a lot of learnings out there. And I think one of the things I've just learned over this long-ish career so far is that every 6 months something changes, right? So Tough Mudder was the cream of the crop for a couple of years, and then things change. And now there's different large event companies that are doing well, and it's kind of like, how do you just be aware of that fact, collaborate with other people, believe it's an all boats rise industry, genuinely want to help other people, and then if you do, really good things can happen, and unexpected partnerships can come from them, unexpected ideas, creative ways to grow. Anyway, I'll stop there, but lots and lots of other ideas.
Well, I think that ties nicely into our first story. Unexpected ideas. I was listening to a podcast as I was traveling, and one story caught my attention by this microbiologist called Lauren Peterson, and apparently they've done this what they call it was a DIY, what they call fecal transplant, and they basically they realized that elite athletes have a very different sort of distinct gut bacterial profile, and what it does, it helps them to perform differently to other people, and so what they were doing here is that they were basically taking, we'll call it poop or whatever the sort of technical term is, and basically putting it in people's guts, and they were finding that they had this significant improvement. And there's a bunch of clinics that are starting to pop up out there where they're doing these transplants, and apparently there's a number of different there's a number of sort of different things that they can prevent, improve, and sort of generally increase your health or performance by sort of having these sort of implants done. And so I guess I've known for a while the importance of your gut bacteria and how that can affect everything in terms of how you think, your mood. But this is definitely taking it to another level. So a question to you, Brian. Like, obviously you're on the cutting edge. I had the pleasure of joining one of your groups and going off in joining a really interesting group of people in one of your mastermind sessions where there was some really interesting conversations going on. So I'm just wondering, would this typically fit into the realm of some of the people you mentor, or is this a little bit sort of too far on the edge at the moment?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think first of all, the gut microbiome is I would bet on it. I would totally put some money in there, because I think we're still early days in what we can do. There actually is a company in my group called Enjoy that kind of does, like, you get your blood work panels. They do that for your gut microbiome, and so I see there's going to be lots and lots of opportunities like that. I think that some of the stuff that you highlighted around fecal transplants and stuff like that, I think those are really important. I love the Brian Johnsons of the world. They're the tip of the spear, as I like to call them. They're trying to figure out what's actually going to work out there. And I think the odds of it having mass appeal of all these different things is pretty low. But the people out there who are willing to, be that tip of the spear and push the envelope, I think is a really important part of our industry. And so I think it's great that they exist. And for me, it's less about, I really delineate between healthcare and what I'm working on. So I think if you're covered by insurance, if you're in a hospital system, That's not to say that we don't want you in this group, but I like, we kind of feel like an us versus them mentality, where it's kind of like, hey, we have to deal with all these headwinds of behavior change. We have to deal with the fact that there's a sick care system that doesn't, it's discretionary income you have to deal with. And so we have this kind of like, hey, we're in it together. Let's try to do what we can to be successful despite the fact. So I think it would be less about if it's out there enough and more about who is behind it, what are the reasons behind it, and kind of how are they doing so far, where they are in their stage of growth. Are they, have they got some traction and need to expand more? And if so, then they're probably pretty perfect for the group.
Yeah, this was new to me, Matthew, when you sent it over. But I've been around elite athletes, work with the elite athletes, and Brian, we should jam on your early Tough Mudder days because I was working very closely with Joe DeSena and Spartan, and I just remember us outspending each other on Facebook, and just trying to grab people. And then it's funny to see years and years later during the pandemic that Spartan ends up acquiring Tough Mudder. But yeah, lots of I'm sure stories that we could both share about those early days. Look, as it relates to this, I think elite athletes are going to look for literally any edge that they can get. I think they should, right? We are, as humans, we want to progress. We want to push the limits and boundaries of what is physically and humanly possible. So the fact that you could take, fecal matter from a donor and insert it into your gut, and again improve performance and improve different markers of performance. And from what I typically, understand here, is that it lasts for many months, weeks or months once you do it. It's not like you have to do it kind of all the time. And it's been shown in some studies to do better. But the question is that, and this is what we always look for, things like lactate sensing or CGM in elite athletes, ultimately, those things found their way down to the mainstream customer or to the biohacker customer. Is this something that could ultimately get us there? Or could this eventually, in 5 years or maybe 3 years at the pace of innovation today, we see a supplement where, sure, you're not going to be inserting donor fecal matter in here, but maybe we identify the active agent, or we identify the active mechanism that's happening. We find a supplement that could maybe give us some of the same benefits to here. So it's interesting. But I don't think it's got mainstream application, at least in the near term.
I'm conjuring up all these different ad campaigns of maybe what this could look like. Probably we'll stop at that point and maybe move on to the next story, which is protein. This is something I've been kind of talking about quite a lot, and it seems as though protein has hit mainstream. I think you've had like athletic greens where you've got your mums taking athletic greens now. It's gone from something that people who were in the small group, sort of underground, that really understood greens. Now it's everywhere. It's in airports, and everybody's realizing that having a green supplement is important. And I've kind of seen this now with protein. Everyone's talking about it. My kids are talking about are you getting enough protein? I did read a social media post where someone was almost sort of saying, look, this protein hype is hype. You don't actually need as much as what they're saying you need. And typically when you get these sort of big pushes, there's always a little bit of a backlash. But I was curious to see Starbucks have actually come up with this, what they call protein cold foam. It says Starbucks have just developed an ingenious way to add 15 grams of protein to almost any drink. So they've got some sort of new technology, and now you can go to your Starbucks and get protein in your coffee. I'm wondering whether this is potentially a marketing ploy, because when I was sort of researching this, it said that Starbucks have come off five straight quarters of falling sales. So I'm wondering, with the sort of whole coffee scene's changing and a lot more competition than what there was, whether this is just a sign that they're sort of grabbing at straws. But yeah, interesting. I guess again, question to you guys. What do you think about this sort of this protein trend where we're putting protein in literally everything that you could put it into? And then secondly, the move of a big, very large sort of consumer brand, Starbucks, now sort of jumping on that trend.
When I started training in the mid '90s, I remember, and I was in high school at the time, but protein, one, your doctor would tell you, my parents, right? Be careful on how much protein you take, and you don't need all that protein and all that. And it was really kind of tied to the bodybuilding culture. And it didn't have a real positive use. I think one, protein, what we've seen in the last 5 years, is really shedding its bodybuilder only image, which I think is a good thing. And it's becoming a lifestyle product. It's become a macro that people track all the time. It's also not just for men. Women are now tracking their protein intake as much as men. And it's also not just post workout. A protein shake isn't something that you just drink after workout. You should, but it's also something that you can consume all the time. So I think with Starbucks jumping in, you know that this trend, if you want to call it that, or awareness, has really jumped mainstream. And with the struggles that you mentioned, Matthew, of Starbucks struggling, yeah, they're probably looking for ways to bring customers back in. And if they've got an innovative foam method to get 15 grams of protein in, I haven't seen anyone else do that. And certainly not one of the people that they're really losing to, especially in urban areas where we all live in, is your local coffee shop. Like we've got a local coffee chain in DC here. There's a couple. I'm sure, in New York, there's several, and same in Southern California. So it's really about the format of protein. So we all know that you need to get more protein. It's not about fish, chicken, beef, tofu, soy, whatever your format is. But it's also about, okay, there's other ways to ingest it. We need to have more of it. And people just don't want to eat plain old chicken breast. So I think this is a great move. And we're seeing protein not just in Starbucks, but you're also seeing it come in all kinds of goods, right? I have Magic Spoon cereal, and there's umpteen cereal companies which are doing it. There's protein that's being incorporated in chips, and Quest has done a good job in having all these new products around it. There's protein cookies and muffins and all of that. So I don't think we're seeing a maturity of it. I still think that we're kind of in the scale up phase of protein in food products.
Brian, where do you see this with the kind of demographic and the community that you? I guess you're probably sort of involved with people that are a little bit more closer to the research and where things should be. Like, where do you stand on this?
Yeah, so it's fun. I feel like I'm on a talk show. It's like, hey, have you seen this? Have you heard about this? What do you think? So it's great, and yeah, I think that okay. So I think protein is just an example of something that's just true throughout our industry, where at the end of the day, we probably don't know, and we never did know the exact correct amount of protein that you should get. That's totally right, and I think one thing that I witnessed, I was at a New York Times wellness event recently, and they had Peter Attia on the stage, and he just got grilled by the person interviewing him about his protein level. Like, well, he's recommending protein that are here, and other scientists say it here, and it was like, how could you go against science? And I just think with all of this, from my perspective, is that if we're just having a conversation that, yeah, we can say it's about protein, but like deep down, it's like, okay, well, people want to be stronger. People want to be healthier. They're being intentional about what they're putting in their bodies instead of like, sugar and like candy and whatever. And so I'm just not a fan of like perfection and feeling like if we're talking about this and there's a movement, I have no problem. Let's engage it. Let's see where it can go, and then the market will correct itself. Once Starbucks starts doing what they're doing, odds are okay. Maybe we got a little heated, and we need to cool off here, and we need to shift to something else. But I mean, I'm somebody who I have. If you've ever heard of Smear Case, they're like protein packed ice cream. Like I feel a little bit better about myself eating ice cream when it's protein packed. And so I think that, like I said, it's not about perfection. It's just about finding what it is that we can do to move the world in a direction where we're being a little bit more health conscious. That's kind of how I think about it.
Yeah, I just want to add, like, look, I look for protein in anything that I eat. So in the evening, my go-to treat is a Greek yogurt. I switched from like a Chobani Greek yogurt to something called Ratio. And there's other kind of performance-based yogurts out there, and this Ratio product has 25 grams of protein in it.
Right.
So I'm always I have two of those. So that's 50 grams right there. My post-workout shake, I have about 50 to 60 grams of protein. So I am always thinking about, am I getting the right proteins? Am I getting the right fats? And those are the two things I'm always thinking about. Then the carbs, because carbs are are easy, right? Carb, to me, when I talk about the
Or
macro
good
being
carbs
carb,
or bad carbs.
both good carbs and bad carbs are, I think, easy. It's like spending money, right? Anyone can spend money. It's harder to actually make money. So to me, that's the analogy I use with carbohydrates. Anyone can eat carbs. You can eat good carbs and bad carbs, but in order to get the right protein and the right fats, you've got to be intentional about it. So if brands are making it easier for you to kind of fill that bucket, I'm all in.
Protein is one of these, again, buzz. I wouldn't say it's a buzzword, but it's one of these trends that everybody, as you say, is jumping on the back of. And there's a huge amount of innovation that's coming in into this sector. As you say, it's crisps. It's now there's clear protein drinks that they're doing. There's Starbucks have obviously got a new formulation of how to get more protein into the drink. And you tend to get these kind of certainly in my experience within our industry or within this space, you kind of get these things that come over every now and again. And another example is the buzzword that we talk a lot about on this podcast, which is recovery. And there's some real cool innovation out there, from red light therapy and cold therapy and IV drips. We've spoken about it all, but this one really caught my attention because it claims it's called a Victory, VKTRY, and it's called the Victory Recovery Clog. At first I thought, well, is this kind of a joke? Because it's almost like a one of those shoes my kids wear or used to wear. What are those kind of sandals that the kids wear? Crocs. Yeah. For those of you who can't see the video, it's like a Croc, and apparently this is a cutting-edge footwear solution for athletes, fitness enthusiasts, and anyone that spends long hours on their feet. And it's made out of a proprietary carbon steel technology. The Victory Recovery Clog is the only shoe featuring full-length carbon fiber plate embedded in the midsole, offering unmatched support, bounce, and stability. So I'm just wondering, Mo, when you've done your workout on Tonal and you've had your protein drink, are you going to be wearing these these Victory clogs around your house to help your recovery? What's your thought on this one?
Well, maybe I should. There are the OFOs, which is another like recovery based shoe. Obviously,
OFOs. I
OFOs.
wonder what are those?
It looks like what you just pulled up there, but without the carbon plate. But they're meant to improve circulation and speed up recovery. Of course, Hyperice recently released their collaboration with Nike with that recovery shoe as well, which I also do not have. So I think, to me, look, as it relates to carbon plated shoes, I've been a runner as Matthew, for most of my life, and I've raced in carbon plated shoes for most of my races in the last decade. And yeah, it makes me faster. It's incredible. Like that, you just feel quicker.
That's why I can't keep up with you when you're.
No, I'm not using it. I mean, I'm sure you're sad to know, but I don't use that for training, just for racing, just for racing. But it does, add. It probably shaves off 3 to 5 minutes off like a half marathon time for me. It's like materially quicker. It's a big difference for me. Part of it is also emotional, right? You're putting on fast, expensive shoes. You're in a race. You're just going to go faster than you are in training. So seeing this carbon recovery kind of clogs, I don't know enough about what the carbon plate specifically does on a recovery shoe. But I guess it's meant to have you bounce back more quickly. I would still rather opt for the OFOs or the Hyperice shoes personally over this one. But we're going to see a lot of innovation happening in shoes. One of the companies which I want to bring up is I'm an advisor to a company called Develop Running, and they just launched a Kickstarter campaign here, and they've been working on this thing for about a year and a half, maybe 2 years since I first spoke to Roy, who's the founder of this product. But I think running shoes had innovation like 20 years ago, and there's kind of been very little since then. I think we're going to see both in the ones you brought up and even the smart running shoes. We're entering this next phase of footwear innovation now.
What do you think? Like, I'm just looking at the advert for those of you who are listening. It's AVELO, but it reminds me of these Nike shoes that came out like probably a decade or maybe longer ago, where you put the little sensor in, and that always seemed like it was quite a good idea because you got stats. And I'm just wondering whether, because of things like the Apple Watch, whether it was not required to put it into your shoe. So just curious, what happened with those the Nike shoes, and it seems as though this provides some data through the shoe as well. Is there a difference between picking up the information from your watch, like an Apple Watch, or having the ability sensors or information within your foot?
Yes. So I think 2 points there. Number one, Nike was ahead of its time with the Fuel Band, with the Smart Shoe. Under Armour tried one as well. The technology just wasn't ready for prime time, and ultimately that's what doomed those products. Today, especially for runners, there's certain fidelity of data that you can get from your watch, like heart rate, and the Apple Watch can even give you things like power, ground contact time, cadence, and other metrics which are important to runners. But it's still an estimate. Typically, what I like to say, if you really want to get the source of truth, you've got to move closer to that source of truth. And if you want to get data from your feet, you're trying to now estimate it from your wrist. You've got to get down to the feet and embed technology in it. That's what this shoe is doing. And I've had a chance to try it out, and I'm pretty blown away by how the AI coach works and how it kind of coaches you through progression and even things like your kick. And I know these are very technical things for a runner, but if you think about running is also exploding in popularity right now. It's having another moment. I feel like every 10 years running has a moment. A lot of people start to run and then they find that it's either painful or they get injured or they're just not sure why. So if you could have a product that's going to coach you on how to run, it now makes it a lot more enjoyable. A lot of people don't like to run. They run because they have to, not because they enjoy it. But if you could make running enjoyable and really have a coach you, that's what a Velo is trying to do.
Brian, how do you look at when you're in your within your business and within some of the groups that you're involved with, advising, coaching, for example, how do you look at innovation? Because it's certainly, we're in a sector where there's always, we've discussed a number of small innovations just today. It almost seems though every week there's something new coming on board. How are you advising business people, entrepreneurs, and to have a framework around what sort of trends that they get involved in, support, sponsorships, partnerships, that kind of stuff?
First of all, I'll say, we used to say at Tough Mudder, experience is the new luxury good. It used to be people wanted watches and houses, but then they started to want experiences. And I think the next evolution of that is wellness and health. And I think that's, the people flouting their Aura rings and, getting the recovery shoes that are, it's a signal. And it's something that makes sense. And I think it's a great place for our society to go towards if we start valuing these sort of things as opposed to some of the more material things. To answer your question, though, I think if you've got something really innovative, it is very overwhelming out there for a consumer. People are very, very suspect. And so what people need to be doing is they need to be finding spaces where they can educate people in a long form way. And so what I find is this is something I help to do with Othership. Othership, for those of you who don't know, it's kind of a brand new concept. I mean, that's not true. It's been around for a very long time in lots of different parts of the world, but the contrast therapy for the American market specifically is relatively new. And so what we ended up doing with Robbie, the founder, is getting him on about 100 podcasts in about 6 months and using that long form space to be able to not just promote the product, but to educate people of like, hey, these are the things, this is what can actually be valuable. These are the benefits. And I also really recommend, try to get science on your side. I really think that ultimately, if you can try to make sure you've got some backing, you end up getting a lot of credibility. And there's actually some really interesting companies out there right now that allow you to get it a lot easier to get doctors to give authentic reviews of the products that you're having. And so I just would really encourage people to, if it's new, if it's really innovative, make sure that the science is there, find yourself the opportunities to educate, and then find the opportunities to then bring it to more of a mass scale via distribution channels like paid ads, whatever it might be.
You mentioned sort of science and doctors. Like there's certainly a lot of, it seems to be a lot of ways now where you can kind of fudge some of this science. I was just this morning looking at some articles on these creatine gummies where most of them have no creatine in whatsoever, and there's some big companies behind them. They're publishing what would seem as research, but if you understand how to look at some of these research papers, it will actually show you that they're omitting to include certain bits of information out there. So is it? I guess when you have a business and you're advising people or you're putting your name to it, have you found any sort of trusted source that you could go to almost like ensure that you're staying the right side of the, I call it the law, but just the right side of the tracks when you're sort of attaching your brand to something?
Yeah, I mean, sadly, in our like post-truth world, it's just very, very difficult to be able to find the true arbiter of what is right and what is not. And I think you're right. If you double click on most studies, are you going to be fully satisfied with exactly what's underneath there? And I say I say to pursue a study not because you need to get a clinical trial and you need to spend millions of dollars and spend millions of months. There's lots of other ways to get more anecdotal data. And I think that it's not, I don't think you go in saying that this is completely the authority, but you have humility, but you also have done your homework so that you're not necessarily saying, because this wasn't a study, I know that this is absolute truth. You're making it clear that you've put the effort in to try your best to make it clear that this is something that's good. But sadly, other than, PubMed and the typical areas where you'll see these studies, I don't necessarily know if there's a true arbiter. I just personally have doctors that I know who I like. I'll kind of, if somebody is in my group and they're interested in something or they have a question, I'll send it to them and I'll get an answer back. That's typically what I do.
Well, I think we're up on time, and typically we share a few takeaways from the episode. Over to you, Mo. Like, covered a lot of ground. What are some of the takeaways that you got from this week?
I think what I want to use the takeaway time for is to talk about a post that I recently did this morning on LinkedIn, where I read an article last night on the New York Times that talked about how M&Ms are pushing against RFK Jr.'s kind of fight to get artificial dyes, out of the industry. And I think what really triggered me in this article is that they talked about how consumers are wanting this because that kids and children who buy M&Ms are really attracted to the bright colors of it, so they consume more and they end up buying it more, and that was really frustrating to hear. So I just went and I did some research, and I found the Food Bait did a post on it, and she's a very popular kind of Instagram influencer, and she had a couple of these examples, but essentially the whole net here is that you look at some of these images and ingredients of things like Doritos and Fruit Loops and Heinz tomato ketchup and even M&Ms. They look different. The ingredients are much more simpler, but the fact that these companies are saying, well, consumers are more attracted to the brighter colors just really triggered me. But because at the bottom line, this comes down to profits, and that's really what this is about. Using artificial dyes is cheaper to make, and the food lasts longer, and the food is brighter. So what they're thinking about is their cost of goods. They're thinking about their sales, and these fruit companies are not at all focused on population health, even though they claim to do that or they claim to care. So we've got to hold them accountable. I think we either, as much as I'm against taxes, but we tax artificial dyes if they're not willing to take it out. We provide incentives to remove it. But the reality is that if they can, these are American companies that are selling a healthier product in other countries. To me, is unacceptable. Right? We should focus on other countries too, but we should take care of home as well. And we should not allow these companies to put these products out there. So I'm all for what the government is trying to do in removing artificial dyes and just essentially try to make our food supply healthy.
Brian, thanks for joining this week. We've kind of put you on the spot with a number of subjects that clearly are sort of outside of your core business. But what are your takeaways this week?
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate you guys having me on, and I think at the end of the day, I just want to zoom out and really encourage everybody to remember. I like to say we're all brothers and sisters in arms in this battle, like Mo just indicated. There's quite a lot of forces out there that are going to keep this world from being healthier. And whether you have a brick and mortar gym, whether you're a manufacturer of gym equipment, whether you're somebody who has a mental wellness app, we are all working together in a fight to try to help make this world better. And I believe deeply that this is a root cause issue, that if we start being healthier, a lot of the other things that are going wrong out there tend to, get a little bit better. And so, I just encourage everybody to make sure that you have a mindset of giving mindset. I really encourage that in my group. I say everybody in our group is three things: they're accomplished, kind, and generous. And if you put enough people like that together, and if you have that mindset to support others in the industry, we're just getting started. If you think about how big this industry could be, if we start getting healthcare dollars, if we start getting to be the size of what some of the insurance companies are out there, we are early days, and we have an obligation to support each other, even if you're not necessarily in the same industry or the same, vertical within this health and wellness space. So that's my Andy Rooney final minute rant. I'll give to you guys.
No, I really appreciate you coming on, and I think that resonates well with both Matt and I. Matthew, any final thoughts of the week?
Yeah, I think after seeing your post and joining some of the conversations at Athertech we had a few weeks ago, I certainly feel that we are in a minority, and we've got some big organizations that for some strange reason seem to be determined to push an agenda that isn't particularly good for us and our children and the community. And I think it's conversations like this and some of the small groups that people like yourself have together, Brian, where we can continue to collaborate. And there's a lot of work to uncover a good direction and a not a good direction. And even today we discussed how difficult it is really to determine the two. But I think there's some great people in this industry, and if there's a commitment to be able to shine the light on what we found out for the benefit of people, I think that's feel good about being part of a movement like that.
Thanks so much for joining us this week, Brian. And if you're listening, one, we encourage you to also check out our YouTube page. We do share a lot of visuals and articles and images which go along with the episode. If you like this episode, we encourage you to subscribe, share, and tell a friend or two. And please join our conversation on LinkedIn or wherever you find us.
Thanks very much.
Great to be here. Thanks so much, guys.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Mark.